Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen. I'm the president of IGI Cyber Labs. We'll get started in just a second. We're excited today to have Derik with us from Augmentt. We're going to be talking specifically about building a solution for MSPs to protect their clients' data and how that has kind of evolved over the last 12 months. Some of the things that have changed and changed pretty dramatically. We're just going to wait for a second before we get into the slides, just letting some of your peers that were registered get logged in and get started. But as always, if you have any questions, please submit them in the chat. We'll make sure we get to your questions today. We had a few submitted in advance. We also had a few submitted into our LinkedIn profile and community as well. So why don't we'll move on just to the first slide here. As always, we've done these sessions for about a year and a half, the cybersecurity thought leadership seminars and webinars that we've done. They were designed to be interactive. They were designed to be, if you will, kind of public service announcements. They were not a sales call. We will be talking about the products today, but it's not so much in a sales orientation as much as it is, what are we doing and how are we working together to help MSPs? The recording will be sent out after the event. We'll also post it on our YouTube channel, so you'll have the ability to download it later. You can review it later. And as always, if you have any questions, please submit those. We also do this on a continual basis. You'll see in a second, we've got some upcoming sessions in June and July coming forward. And as always, if there's a speaker or somebody or a topic that you'd like to hear from, let's talk about that as well. Please submit that to us and we will do our best to get them on board. As it relates to upcoming events, we're going to do a similar discussion with Talibi and Actifile coming up on June 22nd, talking about these very same scenarios, right? How can different organizations that are complementary in nature with no overlap, how can they help assist and build the MSPs as they transition from the desktop support to being a cybersecurity solution provider and protecting the critical data of their clients. For those of you that are seven-figure MSP members, we will have our weekly open office hour session with them on Friday. So feel free if you want to come on board, you want to ask any questions. And then we've always have a live Nodeware live demo and peer Q&A call where you get to one of the MSPs that are using Nodeware. You get to see a product. You get to ask them how they're using it, what they're doing with it, how they're leveraging continuous vulnerability management as part of their overall solution stack. So those are some of the things we have coming up. Today, from a panelist standpoint, Derik, who you see on screen, is with me now. He's the CEO and co-founder of Augmentt. And in a few minutes, we will have George Smith and Frank Raimondi joining us as well. We're going to give you a demonstration of the products. We're also going to be here to answer any questions you have. So, Derik, let's kind of jump right into the conversation. We were recently on a panel together talking about, the things that we do. It became, as I said, very obvious, the MSP world is not only moving from, the physical side of security and the desktop support, but moving towards cybersecurity and providing cyber solutions to protect the critical data of their customers. And, before I turn it over to you for your initial thoughts, it reminds me, 2 years ago when I first came to Nodeware, we had seen statistics like 50% of small business leaders thought that the bad guys would never find them, so they didn't need to worry about cybersecurity. That number, I see numbers, that number's now like 10 or 15%. CEOs, CFOs, board members, investors, think the bad guys will never find them if you're a small business owner. And quite frankly, that number's probably a little higher if you said, is there anybody in your organization that doesn't think the bad guys are going to find you? That number's probably down around 2% instead of 10 or 15%. But let's just talk about that for a second. As as the small and medium-sized businesses that tend to leverage MSPs because they don't have a full IT organization, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges they face on the SMB side as to, going from what was physical security and what was desktop support to what are the things that, keep them up at night, or the things they worry about, or the things they're, asking, requesting, demanding of a third party to help assist them. And maybe we can just start the conversation there.
Yeah, well, Stuart, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to join. I mean, always a pleasure, and you're absolutely right. That panel discussion that we had certainly, raised a lot of interest within the MSPs we were talking to, and I know we got cornered with a lot of questions, so I think this is a great topic. It's a really good question that you asked, or statement that you made, because, as an MSP today, you've got a very difficult job when it comes to protecting the security of your customers. It's a job that is growing very, very rapidly, and the amount of information and infrastructure and cloud and SaaS that you need to look at just is constantly expanding. You're absolutely correct when you say that there's a misconception out there that cybersecurity attacks and threats are something that happens to large organizations. Banks get hacked, or utilities get hacked, and state-sponsored attacks. And while that is what makes the news and what typically will get published in the Wall Street Journal or your local newspaper, the reality is most attacks happen to sub 100 seats organization. And the reality for that is they tend to be the most vulnerable. They're so dependent on their data, they're so dependent on business continuity. And unfortunately, they tend to be the ones that invest potentially the least in securing their infrastructure. They're heavy users of both on-prem, network, and cloud. And so all of a sudden, you've got a market segment, small, mid-sized businesses that are highly vulnerable, highly targeted. You've got an MSP channel that is trying to really understand how this landscape is changing, the security landscape is changing. And on top of that, you've got these new regulations and laws that are being passed that can make MSPs accountable for that. So it's almost a perfect storm of MSPs trying to understand, where do I go? What do I need to do? You've got a customer that is dealing with a very, very wide spectrum of threat. And you've got just a lot of data to process. And that's why, this conversation is so timely, is in being able to see that information and understand how to deal with the risk and how to solve it. So very, very big challenge.
To that point, some of the assessment firms talk about moving from a point-in-time assessment to a, full-blown risk assessment, to a risk portfolio, to a holistic, continuous risk program, to protect your data. And maybe that would be something that you could provide some perspective on, as people are on that journey from, a point in time. I did an assessment, I've got a snapshot of where I'm at, and I got, 50 weeks before I have to do this again. How that's evolved, and how people have to be looking at things on an ongoing basis, on a regular basis, to be able to do not only the right job running their business, but supporting their investors, supporting their board members, supporting their supply chain and customer chain, to make sure they're doing the right thing.
Well, absolutely, Stuart. I mean, the point in time stuff is great if you're doing an audit, if you're trying to do an upfront assessment, or if you're potentially trying to engage with a customer or a prospect. The point in time gives you lots of visibility into the status and the shape of your organization. But the way that I always look at it is you're probably, once you do that point in time assessment, you're probably good for the next few hours, few days. Things are constantly changing. It is so fast, the rate of change with regards to your security posture, that if you're not constantly monitoring, constantly assessing, constantly revising, and on a pursuit of constant improvement, I'll tell you that you're probably only protected for a few hours after that initial assessment. Whatever happens after that, it's going to be wide open. So it is definitely a two-edged sword, and you've got to do both. And I think that's why solutions like yours and ours make so much sense, because they do give you that continuous sort of view of things.
Maybe let's elaborate on that for a second. I'm always reminded of the story. One of our MSP partners used to use a traditional vulnerability management tool that they would run once a month or once a quarter, and they had a law firm, and the law firm came back to them and said, some of our clients have asked us if we're keeping all our critical data at the law firm, are you doing continuous vulnerability management scanning? And if you're not, we're going to leave because we're not interested in having our data potentially exposed at your law firm. And so the MSP didn't necessarily change the offering that they were providing to the law firm. The law firm demanded the change in order to keep them as a client. And it was coming downstream from their clients who say, you're holding on to our data. I want to make sure my data is protected. So it's an interesting, supply chain, customer chain, ecosystem phenomena of data. And maybe, you could elaborate a little bit on kind of how you think, CIS or NIST or some of the others are starting to evolve to handle those type of things.
Well, it's an absolutely amazing point that you made, and you're absolutely right. There is a real difference in my mind from doing a one and done pen test versus an ongoing monitoring and improvement of your infrastructure. Both the frameworks like NIST or CIS and whichever one you want to leverage, they do a really good job at giving you that 360-degree concept of, you start with an audit, you start with a baseline, and everything around it is that continuous improvement. That's the part that's really important. We often hear organizations say, well, I'm compliant, I had a pen test, and the answer is, that's fantastic, that's great. So how are you making sure that not only you are monitoring to make sure that whatever was discovered and fixed in the pen test, things don't get worse or don't get better, and how are you continuously making the environment more secure? What does that process look like? And often you'll get some pretty blank stares of, well, we've been pen tested, we're probably fine, and it's like, that's great, but in a year from now, everything will be much different. So I would say the CIS and the NIST framework are great for creating that 360-degree concept around continuous improvement, continuous audit, continuous security. And I would say that, being able to get the data in a meaningful way, in a way that is actionable, it's the most important part. Both frameworks rely very heavily on data gathering and data monitoring with a path of continuously making improvements. And that's the part where I feel it's a real shame when people say, I've had a pen test or my client had a pen test, it's been 6 months, we're secured, I don't think anything is going to happen. And I always challenge them to say, just monitor to see if the state has changed since your last pen test or the last time you pulled the audit. And without fail, it has always changed for the worse. I always say the best that your security is going to be is the day after you do the audit and you implement the change. And it will degrade by 1, 2 to 5% every week after that. So the longer you wait to continuously look at it and to make improvements, the worse it'll get, the more vulnerable you'll become.
It's interesting you say that. We have a lot of automobile industry compliance organizations that are providing Nodeware as part of their solution stack for automobile dealerships getting to the safeguard that's been put in place. And it's interesting, the FTC allowed them to either do a pen test or continuous vulnerability management to meet 3 or 4 of the pieces. And ironically, now that we're in the we're the week past of the deadline, there's a lot of these compliance organizations that are going back to dealerships that said, even if you didn't select us to get to the safeguard, if you got to the safeguard with a pen test, but not continuous vulnerability management, your data is no longer protected. And the spirit of what it was all about is not really the case. So it's interesting. They're now going back to those same dealerships and talking about, even if you met the safeguard, the spirit of protecting your critical data is not being upheld if you did a one-time pen test. And I think it just talks to the evolution of where people really are on these type of things.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's that continuous improvement is absolutely critical. You know, a lot of MSPs that we talk to feel that their customers are protected because, again, they've met a certain regulatory compliance level, or they've filled out and successfully received cybersecurity insurance, for example. They'll say, well, I'm covered now. And what I always tell them is that if you're relying on cybersecurity insurance to cover you and your customer when there's a breach, I think you're way mistaken. I think that there are more claims being denied than ever when it comes to that. And I would say that while it's great to have achieved the check mark, that I did the pen test, I filled out the form, I got the compliance, I got the insurance, I think it's great, but it is up to the MSP and the customer to put a real plan in place to fix it. And we use the analogy that, you know, you wouldn't, you know, if you want to get home alarm monitoring, let's say from a company like ADT, they'll come in, they'll do an assessment, you'll fix things. That's great, but you can't rely on that alone to forget about locking the front doors and forget about locking the back door, forget about the windows and take the batteries out of the smoke detector. Because without fail, it is the MSPs and the customer's responsibility, shared responsibility, to constantly be looking, to constantly be pushing. And the last safeguard should be the insurance. It should be that you rely on it and we met the check mark once, we don't have to do it again. That continuous piece, that is on the MSP and the customers. It's on their onus to do it. And if they don't, then you are really putting yourself at risk. And again, if you rely on, again, either the insurance or whatever you did at that point in time, it is not going to be there to help you. And more often than not, we see customers being breached and they're completely flabbergasted because 6 months ago they invested and did a ton of work and a ton of assessment. And now they just can't believe that they still happen to get hacked. So, you know, hackers are constantly and you know, bad actors are constantly pushing the envelope of where they can get breach information, data. They're constantly chipping away at it. And that continuous piece, I can't speak to it enough. That is the bread and butter of the cybersecurity piece. It's got to be continuous monitoring, management, improvement.
So maybe before we turn it over to Frank and to George to give a quick kind of demonstration of things, maybe there's a little bit of, you know, there's a coaching moment, right? If you're an MSP, how do you articulate, you know, to a client or to a prospect, you know, why you need to be looking at this data all the time?
Yeah, well, you know, we tell partners and you know, MSPs that the reality is, you know, it's never been easier to affect in a negative way an organization from a cybersecurity perspective. You know, it's gotten way easier than it's ever been for bad actors to penetrate because data and information and resources are spread, you know, over a wide spectrum of technology. What used to be just, for example, all you'd have to worry about the four walls of your organization, what was behind the firewall, all of a sudden, a lot of critical data is making its way into the cloud. A lot more decentralization of administration capabilities, meaning anybody in the organization can sign up online to virtually anything, move data freely, and there's really no checks and balances. So what we tell partners and the way we tell, you know, them when they talk to their customers is to say, number one, it is a complete fallacy that cybersecurity threats only affect larger organizations. More than 90% are sub 100. The cost of a cybersecurity threat is dirt cheap, and the type of cybersecurity bad actor, you know, the profile is becoming much more unsophisticated. Like, these aren't the guys that are sitting at a terminal trying to hack through your firewall. A lot of times there are people that will look at the entirety of your organization, both what's behind the firewall and what is in the cloud. And devices, since, you know, very few organizations, you know, enforce only being able to use a device behind the firewall, you've got a spectrum or a landscape of threat that is growing by the minute. So it's a lot of education to the end customer. And at the end of the day, it is just about, you know, creating a real story around how long could you live without your data before your business would be negatively impacted? How long could you, you know, last without email and without your CRM before your business is impacted? And the answer is always much more impactful at the small business than it is to a large organization. Large organizations have sophisticated in-house CISOs and security teams. They have lots of redundancy. They have lots of people to get you back online. They have lots of money to pay ransom. It's usually a sub 100 business that will be crippled and will be shut down if there is an outage of more than 5 days. And being able to articulate that to a customer, it really puts it in perspective.
More than 5, you broke up slightly. More than 5 what?
More than 5 days. If you were without your data and your critical information for more than 5 days, how would you survive as a business? You know, would you be able to meet your payroll next month? And the answer is most often not.
Got it. That's a great perspective and an interesting time frame for people to think about, you know, as it relates to the bad guys are never going to find me and what do I need to do to take a few steps forward. So Correct. Why don't we do this? Why don't we transition now, a quick little demonstration of what we offer, what you guys offer. And it's not so much a demonstration of the product as much it is the kind of data that is available. And so if you're in the audience, be thinking about if you had this data at your fingertips and you had it continuously, what would you do with this data, both on the MSP side and as a small business, what would you want to see from this data on a regular basis from your MSP? And then we can talk a little bit further about, you know, kind of how we work together, how we complement each other, how we can improve the productivity and the cost effectiveness of the MSPs to deliver these type of things.
Awesome.
So Frank, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks, Stuart and Derik. Good to see you again. So you know, great conversation and sort of the, you know, we've been, my colleagues and I've been out on the road the last couple of weeks and seen Derik and George and you know, what you're saying, we're hearing regularly and particularly what's interesting is right there, you know, a year, 2 years ago, vulnerability kind of meant, yeah, that once a year checklist, right? And people are really starting to see the need for proactive cybersecurity, right? Not just being reactive with a SIM or with the firewall trying to stop things from coming in. They're really needing to be and understanding that they need to be more viewing their data, their systems, their vulnerabilities, right? What's there and what do they need to fix to minimize the risk of being attacked? And just kind of the other thing, I'll just quote it's been spun around. I don't know the original source, but right, you know, the customers aren't too small to be hacked. They're just too small to make the news, right? And so, you know, they're going to get hacked, and you're never too big. Just in the news today, right? The multiple federal government agencies have been hacked and are being. I think they're figuring out exactly what's been going on there. So, you know, you're not too big, you're not too small to get to have a risk going there. So, just want to make sure you can see my screen there, Stuart. You good?
Yep.
Oh. So Nodeware specifically is a continuous, you know, normal business hours vulnerability management scanner. And there are a number of scanners out there that have been around for a long time, kind of more enterprise focused, very heavy on the network, very expensive, very complex in how they go to town and go to market. Nodeware was developed out of a range of practitioners, or part of our company of practitioners doing penetration tests and virtual CISOs and risk assessments and all that. And they needed a tool that was, you know, again, daily. And Derik, you were saying, you know, the amount of time, you can count in the hours, the time after a report's done, its validity, right, and its usefulness. So, you know, we scanned every asset, every IP address every day, right? So that's our continuous messaging relative to vulnerability. So this is just a quick look at the customers, the MSP's view, right? This is a multi-tenant deal. We do a credit score type of material or scoring system, 0 to 999, with the higher the better. You can look at your customers, and actually just quickly to get to this point, we have a number of capture points. One is a virtual network sensor that can go on any device on the network. Could be a Windows device, could be a virtual machine, doesn't need a dedicated system. It's just it's a virtual sensor that can be put on an existing system. Yes, Fozzie, hello. My dog wants to be on as well. Yeah, you're okay. I get you. So anyway, this is going to happen. He was just napping perfectly. It was great. So what you can see is, so we got the virtual network sensor captures every IP address out on the network from IP cameras to printers to BYOD devices to servers and desktops and everything in between. And then we also have agents that can be used for some of those on-prem devices, as well as for all your remote workers or desktop or notebook users around the company, and then some external scans. So all that combined provides you this level of detail by customer that we can see. At a quick glance, you can see this one's got 4 critical vulnerabilities in the network. This one's got 1. Each of them has got something, and so you can do a quick glance. Oh, if there was none of these triangles, yeah, maybe you would address a different customer that day. But let's just look at a normal practice with go get your ball. Sorry, bad timing. So you can look at in the quick view here. You see all your systems that are being monitored. How many are currently online? You see their IP address, their MAC address, fingerprint. We can also do some tagging, and it's basically a way to sort the data across what's in your network. So you could look for up it, go. You can see if you want to just look at Windows servers, for example, you can do kind of a quick sort that way. Or if you're looking for Debian devices, just kind of a quick tool to do there. Where the real value comes in, particularly to a technician, is like, so let's look at this system here, is that normally you might get a list of CVEs or some known vulnerabilities, or you might have to go search for them. Well, here we're actually providing you the specific, each of the vulnerabilities found, and that's great on its own accord, but what we really find is valuable data for the MSP to act on is how to fix that remediation or how to fix that vulnerability. And in this case, right, we've got a description, we've got KB file that's missing, and we can also take you directly to the Microsoft site that will help you address that particular vulnerability. In this case, the Microsoft one. So we're really providing some value in the deliverables, and this we've seen, Stuart, right? We see multiple MSPs always telling us, so this is saving us 20-30 minutes per vulnerability that they find, and not having to go and research it and figure out how to do that. And so that's a very valuable resource and time savings and time efficiency for partners to utilize their technicians, etc. Some of the other things, of course, is relevant is reporting, just what you need to see, how you can you can do it on a schedule, but you've got all kinds of different reports, from executive summary if you're going to the customer in the afternoon and you want to give them a snapshot of where they are, or if you want to give your tech fully full network report. You can also, if you're doing any co-managed businesses, if you're managing certain processes, but you have an on-site IT support person, you can give them access to this information and to support, enable them to come in and look and do things, and again, just from a solid co-managed environment. You can also, if you are capable or functional with APIs, we have a full set of JSON REST APIs that you can utilize to pull any of this element, any of these different data points, whether it's to deploy or to capture the vulnerabilities or to get the assets or to get alerts. All of that is provided within the API set. So, and then the last thing I'll just mention, I'll kick it over to George, who can talk about how Augmentt can use this data in their system. The time to deployment is another big advantage here that we've found. Most MSPs can set this up and actually be collecting data in under 30 minutes. Right, 5-10 to do some setup, 5-10 to do some deployment, and then another 5-10 where actually you start seeing identification of the assets and any other, and then begin the scanning of those. And then once that's done, again, I'll just reiterate that every asset, whenever you come into the system, you can know that without having to schedule, without having to think about it, that whenever you come in, your data is never more than 24 hours old. So again, back to that timeliness and actionability of data that the MSP is getting, and then going back to the value of protecting the customer's data and their system. So Stuart, in fact, if I missed anything on there, I think I covered the big basics. Just want to kind of, we can go through some more if there's any questions that come up later, but otherwise, let me switch it over to George.
Yeah, the one thing after George is done, we might want to come back, show the executive summary, because
Sure.
it's a great example of how with our API, the content that's in the executive summary could be dropped into what Augmentt is doing and talking to the clients about as they start to portray an overall picture.
Yeah, good. Okay, George, off to you.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks again, Stuart, for having us on here today. So just going to share my screen. Frankie, can you see that okay? Okay, great. So everyone, just I think Derik has sort of made some great points about where we are today with kind of cybersecurity. Frank, I love that that expression as well. Not too small to be hacked, just too small to make the news. So coming back to some of the key themes of the conversation, it's really about data and educating your customers on what they're using, how they're using it, what's going on. Okay, so for a lot of MSPs today, we know that Microsoft is a big part of what they're doing, because customers today, a lot of their business data is housed in Microsoft. And to Derik's point, if they were to lose access to that for 5 days, would their business survive? The answer is likely no. And so what we do at Augmentt is a big part of our focus is simplifying Microsoft 365 security for MSPs. So I'm going to take you through the platform really quickly and just show you how we do that, okay? So from a technical level, what we're doing is pulling in all of the information across all of your different Microsoft tenants into one unified platform that's fully multi-tenant and allows you to quickly jump between those tenants and view a range of data across different reports and dashboards. So the first thing we were talking about is, data, the threats, these vulnerabilities. That's something we really want to highlight to our client. And in Augmentt, we can do that by using the threat report. So again, we're fully multi-tenant. So we can click between whichever Microsoft company that we want to look at. Let's pick on healthcare here. And I think, talking about ongoing monitoring, just one pen test isn't good enough. This is something that you can really show, the amount of risk associated within a Microsoft environment to your particular clients. So you have things like a date filter up here. We can go back as far as 3 months, and all of a sudden you can really tell a story to your Microsoft clients around risk. So Mr. Customer, there's almost 200 risky things happening in your environment. This trend is going up over time. Why? Because we're not being proactive with your security. A lot of customers, in fact, some MSPs even don't know that Microsoft does not come secure out of the box. You need to go in, set up these different security policies, and actually they have, writing in small print saying you should use a third-party backup vendor to support kind of your backup and business continuity. So this is all kind of part of the educational process for the customer. Maybe they're a, dentist in Minnesota or a manufacturer in South Carolina. You can start showing them, well, we've got risky activity coming from India, Australia, Spain. Microsoft's identity score for you is only 30%. Your secure score is even worse, it's only 25. Here's some of the top types of risk detections that we're seeing. Here's some of the top accounts within your environment that we're seeing at risk. And you can see number 1 and 2 here, global administrators. That's something that we really want to fix, Mr. Customer. In fact, all those risks, if you want to get granular, we can roll this down and I can show you the who, what, where, when of all the risks that we're actually reporting on currently. And we can even filter those by user if we wanted to get really specific about the certain accounts that are at risk. But again, understanding you guys at as managed service providers, when we have these technical conversations, sometimes it's better to keep things high levels and simple for the customer to understand. So let's focus on some key components of security like MFA. Microsoft has that crazy stat saying that 99.9% of compromised accounts they track every month we're not using MFA. So if we can get that turned on, that's going to be a significant improvement to our security overall. Also, and we can see here, here's 6 accounts at this company that don't have MFA active. So that's something we want to turn on immediately. Also, Mr. Customer, did you know you have 3 accounts at risk that are, currently inactive? We want to make sure that they're onboarded properly and removing that sort of good backdoor opportunity for hackers to get into your environment. So this is a really good prospecting and sales tool for MSPs to really highlight the need for improved cybersecurity services. And it's something you can use alongside other tools like Nodeware as part of a cybersecurity risk assessment. Ultimately, the question you want to be asking at the end of that conversation is, Mr. Customer, how do you want me to handle the risk that I've uncovered for you today? Because someone needs to take care of it. If it's going to be me or MSP, that's great, we can do that. Here's the pricing and package I recommend. Or if not, well, are you going to do it? If so, then that's fine. Please sign this, risk acceptance letter or denial of my services, because I don't want you coming back in 6 months and saying it's my fault whenever I've identified the risk and shown you the steps that you need to take in order to be more secure. And moving on from that, once hopefully they realize that they do need your assistance with improved Microsoft security, you can then move on to our security posture report. This kind of for you as the MSP becomes your roadmap for the things that you need to change and implement in order to improve the security for your Microsoft tenants. So again, we have our multi-tenancy view here. At a quick glance, I can look at all my different clients and see who needs help. And this time we'll jump into our legal client, go one level deeper, and I can show you what I'm talking about. So now at the tenant level, I can quickly look down and I can see Microsoft has certain recommendations around posture and security checks that you should implement, but really we've only got one fully configured, and that's Admin MFA. User MFA is only partially configured, and things like DLP policies and login portal branding isn't configured at all. And the nice thing about Augmentt is that we can actually go one level deeper and begin to get more information about these checks and actually turn them on or remediate against the risk. So for example, with user MFA, I can see all the accounts, I can see the accounts that do have MFA on, and I can click to the non-compliant, aka the ones that don't have it on, see that it's Bruce Wayne here, and then actually take action to get that turned on. So within that, we can go to configure, do things like create a new conditional access policy, or even use the Azure per user to head over to Bruce Wayne and get that turned on with the click of a button. We also have things like our MFA report I just want to show you really quickly, which gives a nice overall layout of the MFA status of all your clients. And again, you can get the kind of all companies view here at a quick glance, see who needs help, or drill into a specific company and even export and share that report on a regular basis. So coming back to what Stuart and Derik were saying, we need to be monitoring this stuff. We need to be constantly looking at it and making sure our clients are aware of what's happening. And Augmentt is all about simplifying that process and making it easy for you, the MSP, to get that done. We also have things like posture alerts. So once we do in our security posture get everything green across the board, we want to make sure it stays there. We've got that really high baseline of security. Augmentt posture alerts simply allow you across a range of checks like admin MFA, user MFA, inactive accounts. If there's a decrease in compliance, so again, we'll use the example of MFA, say someone turns it off or a new user gets added to the company and doesn't enable MFA, we'll send a ticket through to your PSA so you're notified about it immediately so you can take action. So again, following that NIST framework, identifying the risk that we see in the threat report, using the security posture and policies to roll out really strong security configuration across our clients, and then being able to quickly respond to anything through posture alerts, and also last thing here, threat alerts. So again, I just go to my legal client, you can go far back as 3 months. A lot of MSPs love and hate Microsoft threat alerts because they're very, very powerful. A lot of AI behind there, a lot of great information, but they can be quite overwhelming and quite noisy. So at Augmentt, what we've done is give you, the MSP, the ability to categorize and filter the alerts that you want to see, whether it's judging them on the alert threshold, the severity, and then coming in and then only getting, tickets for the ones that you want to see, and then linking it with our engage functionality. You can simply click the alert and do things like reset password, block sign in, sign on of all apps with the click of a button. Very quickly, the other thing I want to show you guys just with regards to sort of again monitoring and holistic security is actually our Discover module, which simply put gives you, the MSP, a full list of all the applications your clients are using. So again, fully multi-tenant, I can go to my all companies view or my marketing client here, and this dashboard is showing all of the applications that they're using. And so this is really, really good for your virtual CISO services. It's really good for your QBRs. It's cementing you as that IT expert, because now you have the data to show your customers all the shadow IT that's in place. So you can start asking questions like, Mr. Customer, why are you using 5 apps to do the same thing? Why is someone using this North Korean file sharing app? I can show you that you've got 50 licenses of Salesforce, but only 3 people are using it consistently. You say you have a policy that no one's allowed to use Dropbox. Well, I can show you the 3 people who are using Dropbox on a regular basis, and if it's the browser or the desktop version. So again, combining that with some of the great information that Nodeware provides around network, you're able to build this really, really comprehensive cybersecurity risk report that also simplifies a lot of that complexity, and using data helps the customer understand there's a lot of pieces missing, there's work to be done, and they need to invest in your cybersecurity services.
George, we got a question about if you have Linux developers, how do you handle the Linux developers in that customer environment?
The Linux developers in the customer environment.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm gonna have to take a pass on that one, Stuart or Derek. I'm not sure if you could cover that. I'm not the most technical of folks, but I can certainly, if someone needs more detail, I'd be happy to connect them with one of our sales engineers, and we can get a detailed response for that. I just know this Windows.
I say we don't get a lot of Linux requests. I mean, it's a super interesting one. The Discover piece is mainly for Microsoft environment, and then obviously everything else is Microsoft tenant specific. So it's definitely not something we hear a whole lot, but I'd love to get the requirements for that, because I love Linux at heart. So it'd be really interesting.
It was, as a former CEO of the Linux Foundation, it's always interesting when I hear somebody say, when we have a Linux developer in our shop, how do I make sure what they're doing doesn't create a bunch of vulnerabilities for us while you guys are, doing a fantastic job of looking at the Microsoft community, if you will.
Yeah. No, it's a great point, and certainly sophisticated organizations that do have in-house development, they're likely to have some Linux infrastructure, Linux developers. So it's but it's definitely an area that's we're looking at, but isn't something that's actively being addressed in our platform.
Got it. Well, that great demonstration. I mean, it's once again, coming back to the panel discussion we had a couple of weeks ago, right? You see two kind of very, a significant amount of data coming out of both of these offerings with almost no overlap. That if you're a small business leader, you probably want bits and pieces of this to help you run your business. And if you're an MSP, you ought to be able to consolidate this information very quickly into something that can easily be shown. That's maybe why, Frank, I don't know if it makes sense, you could talk a little bit about the executive report and maybe show the executive report. And then, Derik and George, maybe from your perspective with that executive report and some of the things that you show on your dashboard, how does an MSP, kind of simply and easily articulate, some of the aspects of a risk profile to their clients?
Yeah, so let me start. So again, just on the reporting, right? If, this is a scheduling thing, and this is kind of, again, back to the regularity. You can do a scheduled report delivery. So if you want it, daily, if you want it weekly, in this case on Sunday, you want these 3 reports, and you want it for all your customers, you can have them delivered directly into the site. So again, then with the APIs and the integration that we'll have with Augmentt, you can just pull them right into the reports that George was showing there. So again, there's a whole bunch of different reports from executive summary to a full detailed top vulnerabilities report to an exceptions report, which kind of goes back into an auditing and to a compliance management. You're managing who's got access to the data and the systems as well. We help provide some of that information. But in terms of an executive summary, let me just pick a new one here, or one that was done yesterday. You can, again, pick that real quick. And you can look on here. So this is an unbranded report there's no Nodeware mention, no Nodeware logos, not even in the MSP, but you can, as an MSP, customize this report, put your logo in here that comes in HTML or PDF version. So as long as you got the right editing tools, you can do what you need. But you get the top 10 vulnerabilities, again, in a very quick, again, shareable document that somebody's gonna, understand. The end user is gonna have a clue of what, okay, top 10, I don't need to know the top 100, I need the top 10. Are you addressing them? How are you addressing them? And that's the conversation you have with your end user. But you can look at the most common, you can look at the vulnerability profile, and then you can also get within there just a quick look at what the assets are that you're scanning and the scoring. So can just, and then a little bit of description. So this is a very useful report. Again, could be just on an initial assessment or an ongoing basis. But as showing your progress as an MSP, you might say, last month we were at 800, we've done these 3 things, now we're at 838, we're making improvements, here's our roadmap of getting you to 900, and then beyond that to 950. What are we doing again, it's just trying to continue showing value in the proactiveness and the attack on the attacks, or the attacks on the attack surfaces.
Hey, Frank, or Stuart, I had a question about how MSPs are utilizing that score today, or how should they be utilizing it? Because we often get asked when we do our discovery or we look at Microsoft, obviously there are scores and benchmarks that are provided. Our partners often ask us, like, should we make that publicly available to our customers? Should we keep it for ourselves as a roadmap to improvement? I'm just curious to see how your MSPs are using that score, and how are they using it to sort of drive adoption or change of the customer's environment?
Yeah, Frank and I may have very different answers for that based on our experiences and the customers we talk to. But I think the two perspectives might be very interesting. So I'll let Frank go first, and then I'll give you my thoughts on some of the things that I hear.
Well, yeah, I think part of the usage of I mean, again, data is king, right? So as long as you could be, legitimate to your customers and be honest with them, and providing that number, and again, what you're tracking it, right? That's a piece of it. But it's quickly able to show the severity, right, of an issue, right? If your customer, in this case, is 957, okay, they're in pretty good shape. There's always room for improvement. There's always things to be looking at. But these 747, 837, there's some issues in this network that, Mr. Customer, we need to address. This is all external environments that are being tracked here. But right, so there's some clear concerns on what is going on with this one highly vulnerable.com site. So I think again, data is king. Enabled to show over time tracking of what we're reporting, I think is a important piece of that. Stuart, do you have a different play, or?
Well, the other thing that when I get asked this question, to me it's all about the device and what's the device connected to and what's the risk associated with it. So potentially you have some devices that are highly vulnerable, but if they're highly vulnerable but not connected to any critical data, they may not be anything that you need to immediately focus on, because once again, you can use the tagging capabilities, you can use a variety of different things to say, once again, this is all about protecting your critical data. And if you've got highly vulnerable devices that are connected to critical data, those are things you need to do immediately. If you have some highly critical devices that maybe drive the score, but aren't necessarily attached to any critical data and couldn't really get you in real trouble, different conversation. So I think it comes back to not the number, but where's your data, who's connected to it, what's the issue you have with that device, and are you managing the device so bad things don't happen with your data, right? Getting back to the law firm example I used at the very beginning, right? If if the person who has a highly vulnerable device isn't attached to any of the client's critical data, may not be as important to fix as one that is the partner that has access to all of the data. If that device is vulnerable, you may want to fix that one immediately, right? So I think it gets back to the business problem, right? And what's the business issue? Where's the data? And what puts your business at risk, not necessarily your vulnerability score.
That's great. Yeah, we often get asked about the scores that we provide, and half the people love it, half the people don't really understand how to use it. But I think your point is bang on, which is it's a score to give you a relative understanding, at a very quick glance of where it is, but without context, it's very hard to understand whether a score is good or bad. I think the context piece of it is really where things start to crystallize for both the MSP and the customer. And it becomes a bit of a rallying score. It's not, there's no magic number. It's really, what is the score? What is it based on? How critical are those pieces? And should we be looking to improve that? So it's, to me, they're incredibly valuable, but you're right, context is all key.
Well, and I think, if I'm the CEO, CFO, COO of a business, or, today I'm the president of the subsidiary, right? What I want to know is, do we have any vulnerabilities on devices that have access to the critical data that could cause us business harm? That's what I really care about. And if my partner can educate me on that, that's what I want to pay for, right? The score, I'm less concerned about the score. You know, for instance, we have a client that's got a bunch of old Windows 10s machines, right? And they got a ton of vulnerabilities on them, but they aren't connected to any critical data. So while it's important, it's not critical to their business. Getting to your point of there's nothing connected to those devices. They're going to take them down for 5 days. They're never going to recover from. So are they nice to get to? Absolutely. But are they critical we get to today? Not at all.
Yeah. I would use the, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I think cybersecurity is in the exact same boat. If you can't create a baseline for yourself that's relevant to your organization, it's never going to improve. You're never going to be able to manage. So it's, yeah, great point, sir.
So I think we've got about 10 minutes. If you have any other questions, please submit them in the chat box. Maybe what we'll do is kind of go around a couple of closing comments from each one of you. You know, some, you know, perspective. Once again, if you're an MSP, what are some things that you could do that could help you be more productive, more effective, more efficient? And how do you articulate, you know, that the conversation, if you will, to your clients or prospects? And then, you know, on the other side of it, if you're a small business leader, you know, what are some of the things that you ought to be asking or suggesting your MSP provide you, you know, if they're going to be your trusted partner? And I think that's always a good way to kind of frame the conversation. So since these guys are our guests, you know, Frank, we'll ask you to go first, and then we'll go to the.
Well, I would say that the one interesting thing that we hear a lot of it, and it's really changed over the last 6 to 12 months in particular, is, you know, we're talking data, is the need for this data. You know, if you're either applying for or trying to renew your cyber insurance, is a critical piece here, right? This need for proactively looking at your data and at your systems and at potential vulnerabilities and risk, you know, risk surfaces. You know, we at all these shows we're coming up, and I mean, more people, you know, understand vulnerability. They know they need to get it. They're just trying to, you know, figure out a time they can incorporate into their stack. You know, the easy piece with Nodeware is, you know, time to deployment, time to collecting data, and the, you know, the readability, if you will, the usability of the data that we provide in the reports is an important element. So, you know, if you're preparing your customers for, you know, compliance and audits, right? These are the things we, you know, I think what George is showing there with the MFA characteristics and status and the other elements, right? To be able to quickly show this information to, you know, your carrier or to, you know, to your customer of, hey, you know, you're likely to be able to get lower premiums because you're doing these things. You know, one, you're going to be able to get it, and two, you might even get it at a cheaper rate than you would have otherwise. So, you know, I think this is a great source of useful data that adds value, adds stickiness to an MSP's customer, adds true value to the end user that they're servicing.
So we did, and then George, I'll go to you. We did get one question: is are these tools MSP channel only, or are they also being marketed to businesses? I'll answer for us. You know, we are an MSP only product. We make the product available through, you know, through distribution partners to get to the MSPs so they can buy the way they want to buy. For those that want to buy from us directly, that are MSPs, they can do that. But we are primarily a distribution offering to MSPs.
I'll make just a distinction on that, though. We do have a lot of MSPs that I mentioned before, I think even that are co-managing with an IT department, right? So if you are an end user and, you know, you're seeing the need for this, contact us and we can help you find an MSP that at least could resell it to you, if not help you manage it.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is we do a lot of matchmaking, right? We do these public service announcement webinars all the time with the intention of helping to educate small business leaders. What are the issues that they need to be aware of? And, you know, we put them in touch with a partner who can provide that solution for them because they most likely don't have the skills in-house to do it themselves. So we talk about it from both the SMB perspective and the MSP perspective, but we are absolutely a channel only product offering. And then George, I'll let you just answer the question and provide some closing comments as well.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, Augmentt is also a channel-centric platform. It's purpose-built for MSPs, and I think that's what I'll kind of touch on for my closing comment is, for you, we understand MSPs are incredibly busy all the time, and so really you have to ask yourself, how much is your time worth? So, using a tool like Augmentt, that's a big focus of us, is really helping just simplify Microsoft security, because today, it's not multi-tenant, and so a lot of MSPs, aren't being proactive because it's cumbersome and it's manual to go tenant by tenant by tenant, implement these security best practices, policies, procedures, and then by the time you get to the fourth customer, you almost have to go back into the first tenant to make sure everything that you did on the Monday is still applicable, still active, still occurring. We had Frank, myself, and Derik were at an industry event this year, or just this week actually, and we had one of our customers stop by the booth and say, per technician, Augmentt is saving me 6 hours a week, so over an hour a day on text, because it's multi-tenant, because we've baked in the best practices and are just making it easy. That frees up time, it increases profitability, and just lets MSPs focus on other aspects of their business, like sales, like marketing, like what the next 2 to 5 years is going to look like, instead of constantly fighting fires and kind of having things go off ever. Like get your security baseline high, get those best practices in order, so that you're reducing the noise and freeing up your time. So that's what I'd finish up with, is think about how much your time is worth to you and start investing in tools that help you save time as well.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Eric, I think that just leaves you.
Nope,
Yeah,
Derek,
so
you.
Cybersecurity, it's a challenge. It's difficult, and there's no silver bullet. There's no one platform, one solution, one thing that you do and then you're covered. And it's ever evolving. You think you solve 99% of the problems and the vulnerabilities, and you'll find 10 others. And that's the nature of it, right? These bad actors are constantly poking at every aspect of the organization, whether it's cloud, on-prem, device, firewalls, VPNs, like you name it. They are constantly probing every little piece of it. They are moving at light speed. So as a channel, we need to be evolving that quickly also. The name of the game is data, right? We know that we use a stack of product that produce a significant amount of very useful information. And as an MSP that wants to really be a partner to their customer on the cybersecurity, you need to be a master at how to interpret that data. What does that data tell you? What does it mean? And prioritize what you're going to fix. I always encourage MSPs, follow a framework like NIST or CIS. That is a great framework for helping you understand where does data sit, what application will provide me what data that I need, and make sure that you've got that complete coverage. It doesn't matter what framework you use. Obviously, I'm preferential to CIS and NIST, but there are lots that are out there. Follow a framework. Be very, very selfish in the tools that you use that will provide you the data that's actionable. Make sure that you can respond quickly. Work with great partners like Stuart and Frank that will provide that information, and find a way to visualize that information and manage that information in one central location. So look for ways for data to integrate, to make it easier on yourself and your technicians to come up to very rapid conclusions. From data to conclusion, you've got to be quick. It cannot take you weeks or months before you solve things. You've got to be rapid. You've got to look at the data, and you've got to make it actionable. So work, with us, work with your vendors to make sure that you're looking at the right data and you're looking at it in a very time-sensitive way.
Thanks, Derek. So a couple things. We did get a question about, a device is on the network. It must have access to all the critical data. And yes, with with remote workforces and the ability to provide agents on all devices that are remote at no additional cost, yes, you can have remote devices that don't necessarily have access to all the critical data. So I would look at it that way. I would also look at the grouping of some of the devices to keep them away from critical data if you don't necessarily need them connected to all of your critical systems. We've got 1 minute. These are a couple of the items we have coming up. Obviously, you can register for these off our website. You can also go to our LinkedIn page. We want to connect. We want to build a community. We want to collaborate on LinkedIn. So if you wouldn't mind, let's connect with us. Let's add information. Let's have a collaborative approach to everything that we're doing. And then we'll just put on the next slide is some contact information. If you need to get a hold of us, you need to get a hold of Augmentt, go through Augmentt at augmentt.com. We're looking forward to continuing the conversation. We're at the top of the hour. We will continue to do more of these where the output of Nodeware plus other key partners like Augmentt that have a critical set of solutions where there's zero overlap. We're going to continue to work with folks like them to be more productive, to lower your time, your costs, your profit, improve your profitability at the same time. So I want to thank everybody for attending today. We're available for any follow-on questions you have, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next session. And if there's any speakers or topics you'd like us to cover, please let us know those as well. So I want to thank Derik and George for their time today. We really appreciate and value their partnership. And we're looking for, as I said, a variety of ways to make MSPs, more productive and more efficient, more effective as they support their business clients. So with that, thanks from Frank and I, and everybody have a great day. Derik and George, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Frank.
All the best. Cheers.
Cheers.